Welcome back. Could I please request you to take your seats? We are ready to begin the next session. A warm welcome to all of you. We will now kick off the last session for the day, Scaling Green Entrepreneurship by H&M Foundation. I now invite the panel to join us on stage. Arpit Sharma is the CEO of Skill Council for Green Jobs. Madam Lynett joins us from Kenya and is the Deputy Director in the State Department for Social Protection and also heads Senior Citizen Affairs, Community Capacity Support and Development. Welcome. Sam Owilly is the CEO of BOMA. He is a leader, a social entrepreneur, and a respected sector expert on topics including poverty alleviation, financial inclusion, livelihoods, and climate change. Shivi Sheoraan heads the India Liaison Office for IKEA Foundation, and he has more than 20 years of experience in management consulting, project management, and business development. Venkat Kotamaraju is the director at Intellicap, leading the global circularity and climate solutions practice. A warm welcome to all of you. This session will be moderated by Anjum Khalidi, who is the Senior Director, Development Director at BOMA. A warm welcome, Anjum. Thank you so much for being here. Over to you.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here with you all. The last session of the day, we're super excited. Thank you to all the esteemed panelists for being with us today. There's no doubt that climate change is affecting each one of us, but how we are able to adapt to the climate crisis really depends on where we live, our economic status, and our ability to withstand shocks. Personally speaking, I almost barely made it to Delhi today due to the hurricane that hit the US East Coast, but I made it in one piece, thankfully. And each one of our esteemed panelists here are dedicated to making sure that the most marginalized populations, those who are hardest hit by the climate crisis, are equipped and are well supported and included in the circular economy. So today we're going to dive deep into kind of what is working well, some solutions that we can learn from each other across the globe. So we are very honored to have representation from each part of the sector, each stakeholder of the sector. We're each a unique piece of the puzzle, and what we're really hoping to do in the hour that we have together is to foster a dialogue on global South-South learning, and so hopefully we can walk away with some kind of tangible solutions that we can each take away with. So first I'd like to invite Arpit to share kind of what is the state of the sector, kind of what is the state of play in India when it comes to green jobs and the climate.
Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank Charcha for inviting me for this prestigious panel. And I would also like to thank my other panelists for being a part of this beautiful panel discussion and the wonderful audience who are listening to us. So when we talk about climate change and the opportunities today, the country, and especially the entrepreneurship opportunities, I would just like to take everyone back a little, like let's say 5 years back. So first of all, we have to, as a country, we have to realize and understand that we are the third largest polluter in the world after US and China. India is the third largest polluter. And our emissions are so high that we are impacting other countries, neighboring countries also, which has a huge impact on their environmental values. So India took a pledge way back when the Jawaharlal Nehru Solar Mission was launched, and India decided to install around 175 gigawatts of renewable energy sources. This target of 175 gigawatt was revised in COP26, which is the Conference of Parties, which was held at Glasgow, Scotland, where the Honourable PM had given 5 main pledges in front of the UNFCCC, which is the United Nations Framework for Climate Control. So the first big pledge was that India would reduce its carbon emissions by 1 billion tons by 2030. So if we talk about reduction of 1 billion tons of carbon emissions, it is a huge target. I mean, the emissions are directly related to a nation's development. And you are talking about reduction of emissions. As a country, we are taking a pledge. So there is a lot to do. We need to have a technology transfer. We need to have funds, international funds moving in the country. In order to do so, we need to completely rechange the way we function, our technology, our machinery. The second big pledge was that India would be net zero by 2070, which is talked in many, many forums. China says that they would peak their emissions by 2030, and we are saying that we would be net zero by 2070. So we have these developed countries who have been historical polluters, and they should be net zero by 2030, in my opinion, and I have to be a critic as a part of the environment team. But fine, we also take that as a challenge, and we are aggressively working towards it, which I would discuss, further in my debate. The third is that we would be having our 50% energy requirements to be met by renewable energy sources. So today, if you see the energy mix in the country, it is somewhere around 20-22% from renewables, which is a huge mix. And we are saying that 50% of the energy requirements to be met by RE sources. So we have to scale up the deployment of solar, wind, biomass, biofuels, hydrogen. And the major and very important component is that India would lead to a pathway where our carbon intensity of the economy gets reduced by 20-25%. So these are some huge commitments which have been given in the international forum. And how India is working towards them, so we have this solar mission. Now the target has been revised from 175 gigawatts to 500 gigawatts of non-fossil fuel capacity by 2030. And no one as an industry or as government could ever imagine 4 years back or 5 years back that India could actually go up to that journey, and we are today the highest deployer of renewable energy sources in the world. We have surpassed China, we have surpassed Germany, we have surpassed Japan, we have surpassed America. I would also like to tell you that I'm so sorry. I would also like to tell you that in continuation to this, the green hydrogen mission in the country was announced way back in January 2023, where as a country we aim to produce around 5 million metric tons of green hydrogen. So for all of you who are not aware about the green hydrogen, hydrogen has been produced since ages. You see all those balloons which fly up in the air, they are all hydrogen balloons. Hydrogen is used as a fuel if not as a fuel, then its application is there in every industry. Hydrogen is widely used in the hydrocarbon sector, in the oil and gas refineries. So 5 million metric tons of hydrogen production by 2030 requires a lot. I mean, we need to have electrolyzers, we need to have installation capabilities, we need to have these pipelines, these storage devices, because it's highly flammable and volatile. So as a country, we are moving towards it, and in 2024, we can see that some major announcements have come up from various companies like Adani and Reliance and Homi Hydrogen and Avada Group. In fact, I recently happened to visit Odisha, where I saw that Tata SEZ in Gopalpur has a complete, initially they were supposed to set up a chemical factory there, but somehow they did not set up the factory. And this entire SEZ zone has been given to the hydrogen factories. It is so huge that it took them 10 years to create the boundary. So the hydrogen mission will create, as per the records of as per the ministry's guidelines, it would create around 6 lakh jobs in the green hydrogen space. And how it is produced, it is green because it is emission free. So you require a renewable energy power production to do the electrolysis, and the water molecule splits into hydrogen and oxygen. So you have these cars which are on fuel cells. So the water, when the hydrogen molecule is split, it is applied in various industries or used as a fuel. So as a country, it is very interesting, and the way we are systematically moving towards achieving net zero is actually phenomenal. And as Skill Council for Green Jobs, we have already taken this initiative of training these candidates through through industries and through various training institutions. And we aim to train around at least 10,000 people in the green hydrogen space by 31st of March 2025. So that's how we are systematically moving towards this journey. Thank you.
Thank you, Arpit. That's amazing. It definitely seems like a large task at hand, but there's a win-win in terms of youth and employment and our ambitious climate goals. Similarly, Madam Lynett, I would ask you to paint the picture from a policy perspective of the context in Kenya, and kind of what are the challenges we're seeing there in terms of youth unemployment and climate.
Thank you, and thank you for this great opportunity. It's my first time to be in India, and I love it. I'll give the Kenyan perspective. In Kenya, when we look at our constitution, it gives the youth as a person who is between the age of 18 to 34. So within the people who are in this room, how many are in that age, so that I understand our audience? 18 to 34? Yes, quite a number. So our Kenyan population is around 47 million. And out of this, 29% are youth, that is between the age of 18 to 34. And out of that, there are about 13 million youths in terms of numbers. Out of that, we have 29% who are unemployed. So most of the youths are either unemployed, or they are underemployed, or they are inactive. Out of those ones who are employed, 80% are working in the informal sector, and they are based in the rural areas. So that just gives us an overview of the Kenyan situation. And Kenya, just like any other country, is affected by climate change. We've had seasons of high temperature. We've had seasons of rainfall variability. We've had the sea level rising. We've had extreme weather events. So Kenya is not excluded. And looking at the number of youths, there is a huge bulge of the youth population. And we can use these demographic dividends to ensure that we engage the youths in climate action. So as a country, we are trying as much as possible to ensure that we integrate youth climate actions into our policies. We are trying to capacity build the youths to ensure that they are engaged, and also involving the youth-led organization in climate action. In terms of the policy context, we have the State Department of Climate Change, and within that climate change, we have the Climate Change Act of 2016 that speaks to issues of youth and climate. We have the Youth Development Policy that was enacted in 2019, and this affirms that the youths need to be engaged in green entrepreneurship. So we have ensured that we streamline issues of youth and climate change in all our ministries. We have the climate change units incorporated in all the ministries that are in the government. And we also have the youth desk that tries to address the issues of youth and climate. So we are saying that without the youth, then we cannot be purporting to be having climate actions if we don't involve the youth. So we've identified the youth as a resource, and we are saying that if we don't engage them, then they can also be a potential risk to our environment, and therefore there is need to actively engage them and ensure that they participate in climate action. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Lynett. Sam, can you speak a little bit about how BOMA is partnering with government and philanthropy to design green entrepreneurship solutions?
Yeah, thank you very much, Anju, and thank you, the NAJ and the organizers for inviting us. I feel very honored and privileged to be participating in this dialogue. Particularly because it is a South-to-South dialogue, so I feel very comfortable sharing my experiences with you, because I know most of it resonates with you. To your question, Anju, BOMA at the center of government and the donor community or the philanthropy community, I actually find myself, right on the spot, because on my left is one of our key funding partners, HI Foundation, and on my right is our main partner, that is the government. So this is actually collaboration in practice in addressing one of the world's greatest challenges, which is climate change. Having said that, we have about 50% of the world extreme poor living in sub-Saharan Africa, and the majority of whom are women and children. Children actually being the majority, despite them forming just 31% of the about 400 million population living in extreme poverty. And as BOMA, we've taken the initiative to come up with an economic inclusion model that puts people at the center, working with them to, at the intersection of improving their livelihoods and also the planet. So we support the women, the youth, and also the refugees to start up small, profitable businesses that are climate positive or climate neutral in nature, to help them recreate, rebuild, or reconstruct their livelihoods while also contributing positively to their local environment. We believe in green entrepreneurship, not as an initiative, but as a value. We are looking at it as a value system that needs to be built bottom up. And from the conversations in the morning, I think one of the key themes that has been coming out is the issue of inclusivity. And we believe that youth, forming the majority of the population out of employment, would form a critical mass that would help push and drive the green entrepreneurship climate mitigation agenda. And so we are really, really honored to be catalyst for change, embedding and entrenching green entrepreneurship as a pathway to delivering economic prosperity, which also flourishes in environmental conservation. So we believe that this way we are making our meaningful contribution to the triple nexus of circular economy, where we look at minimizing waste, endless reuse of resources, as well as also economic prosperity that is climate positive. In working with government, we are lucky, so to speak, lucky quote unquote, that the Kenya government in particular has prioritized climate adaptation, climate resilience within its policy framework. We have His Excellency the President of Kenya leading the African Union drive on climate change. And this has given the prominence on climate change conversations and dialogues within the country, ensuring that every department, every institution mainstreams and take active role in driving climate change. And it's a bit harder for us who are working in the rural communities, because more often than not, you really don't get their voices at the table of conversations. And that is why for us to even get the opportunity to come and share the work that we do as BOMA with those rural communities to make them agents of change rather than just victims is a great honor to us.
Thank you. Venkat, I'd like to jump to you. So green entrepreneurship is not new in India, of course. So can you shed some light on kind of what are the challenges, what's missing, what do we need to do to become more scalable so that these solutions can, take hold long term and not just be kind of blips or short-term pilots?
Sure. First of all, thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here. Let me set the context by saying let's start with what is the intent for green entrepreneurship, right? And I think, like you said, it's not new. And the conversation was about how do we scale it and to address all these challenges, whether it's in terms of addressing the country's net zero ambitions or the industry's net zero ambitions, or how do we engage with the government, how do we engage with philanthropy, how do we engage with industry. For us, intent is always prime. And I think it has to start with understanding if this is not a new concept, is there a missing piece in the puzzle that will help us scale better and faster, right? So we think of the two operative words for us is pace and scale, right? If you broadly look at, I'm making a blanket statement, but looking at all initiatives or efforts that have happened around green entrepreneurship and circular entrepreneurship, sector agnostic, geography agnostic, we'll see that there is a lot of focus on either the supply side or the demand side. What I mean by that is think of capacity building, right? While there is an intent to reskill, upskill, and create a workforce which has got green skills or circular skills, there is not much effort that happens on making sure that there is a demand for those jobs, right? So the first thing that is a challenge towards scaling is how do we bridge the demand-supply asymmetry. So the capacity building is one. Second is if you think of most of the underserved and marginalized individuals and communities, we spoke about youth, we speak about farmers or smallholder farmers, we speak about waste pickers, or any of those dimensions, you'll realize that for most of them, the proof of the pudding is when the industry buys in, right? All the efforts, right? And for example, the simple reason that I exist in this role is that we want to make sure that there is a greater role that the industry and the private sector can play. Simply because we all know that there's only so much of development capital that's available to solve any of the three existential challenges. Think of climate, think of nature loss, think of inequity in its broader dimensions. So the private sector has to play in, and when I say the private sector, it's the industry and the commercial capital providers. Smallholder farmers, for example, can't transition to adopting regenerative farming practices simply because they don't know that the promise of better yields 36 months from today can't happen unless there is a demand commitment or an offtake signaling from the industry, right? So the demand has to be there. So the first challenge or the first piece that's missing in the puzzle is how do we solve for both the supply side and the demand side? Take the fashion industry as an example, right? And that's true for most of the other sectors as well. The demand for alternatives to plastics or petrochemicals-based products or raw material can come from natural fibers, but is there a demand? Is the industry willing to adopt and willing to commit that they will transition away from plastics or plastics in most of its forms to an alternative? Is there an evidence that is there? So the first one is demand and supply both. So you need to solve for demand and supply both. Let me highlight that with a very specific example. One of our flagship programs is called Closing the Loop, and we've partnered with and created a round program called Samyuk Shakti with IKEA Foundation and the H&M Foundation, working with Nudge and Satwa as well. What we started with the intent was, if we wanted to scale green entrepreneurship, how do we leverage what's already there, right? And we started with the intent of saying, to address climate, to address nature loss, to address inequity from our livelihoods, from income, from making it participatory for communities like the waste pickers and the lot. We started with in terms of saying we will build a theory of change which is focused on not starting with commodities, because that's always been happening, because commodities and commodity value chains and supply chains are very critical for the industry. But the intent has always been on let's strengthen the value chain. The intent has not been to focus on who are the people who are directly or indirectly impacted by the value chain. If development is happening, if growth is happening in the right trajectory, are they benefiting from that growth? So we flipped that argument upside down, and Sam, you were speaking about taking a bottom-up approach, right? So the paradigm shift is saying, let's design a program with the waste pickers on the ground, with a very clear intent that we will build the value chain for recycling the material or bringing back materials and resources into the economy. And the simple reason was that if you look at from a sector agnostic and a geography agnostic view, 70% of the global emissions are linked to materials. Materials, any material you can think of, everything from cotton to jute to nickel, cadmium to anything that makes up a solar panel. Materials, the way they are grown, harvested, mined, extracted, to the way they are produced and manufactured and processed, to the way they consumed by people like us and by the industry, and the way they get retrieved at the end of their life. That in itself is 70% of the carbon footprint. Plain and simple. So when we think of, is there a formula, is there a framework for us to go from where we are today to scaling green entrepreneurship? One of the pathways that we follow, for example, around the Closing the Loop program is, how do we build an ecosystem? How do we bring everyone from the waste pickers, the civil society organizations, the industry, the philanthropic organizations, the commercial capital providers, and make it work? In the last 2.5 years that we've started working with 2 waste micro-entrepreneurs who used to be erstwhile waste pickers, they've gone on now to start having commercial contracts with major recyclers. They've started to now work with brands who are engaged in, with us in designing in-store collection drives. So we're bringing back material into the manufacturing ecosystem. We're stopping the use or the need for virgin materials to come in by keeping the materials in the economy. Right? So green entrepreneurship, the biggest challenge or the biggest opportunity for us is solving for both the supply side and the demand side. Not just in creating a workforce that is skilled, but they need to find jobs. Another case in point, and I'll take a pause after this. We started working with the government of Bangladesh, and again we partnered with H&M Foundation. We said, how do we bring back this 80% of the formal workforce, and this is the largest employer of formal workforce in Bangladesh, which is the garment manufacturing industry. 80% of the 4 million people formally involved are women, which means 3.2 million. Out of the 3.2 million women, 2.5 million as of 2021 are expected to fall out of workforce simply because the skills are not ready for a automated industry. So automation and mechanization will happen in the industry. So 2.5 million out of the 3.2 million will fall out of workforce, and that's already happening. And this is not just the natural life transitions that they go through in becoming mothers and upskilling themselves, taking care of the families and migrating back to where they come from. So when we started the program with out-of-work women garment workers, it wasn't just important for us to give them higher skills that are still future-ready. They'll be future-proof, so even if there is automation and mechanization, the skills would still hold them good for a very long time. We had to make sure that we work with the SMEs, we work with the manufacturers and the supply chain in garment manufacturing and allied industries to make sure there is a demand for those skills. So we worked with building the capacities and capabilities of 50 SMEs in the jute sector, in the garment manufacturing sector, in the banana fiber value chain, for example. And out of the 1,500 odd out-of-work women garment workers that we've trained just in the last 18 months, 857 have been put back in work. So we've put back 857, 65% odd of these women who've been trained have been put back because the 50 SMEs that we trained and helped adopt circular economy or circular business models had a demand for people with those specific skills. And each of these 857 women so far are seeing an average income increase of anything between 15 to 18%. Right? So that's the proof of the pudding. And that happens because it's not just the intent of saying, let's upskill them. Think of our own trainings, right? So imagine if our HR team puts us into a room and saying, let me teach you how AI works and how you can apply AI. But if our jobs and if our day-to-day jobs don't factor for how I'm going to use that AI tool, that knowledge is of no use. So you need to solve for supply and demand both. I'll take a pause.
That's really helpful. That's really great. And now I'd like to turn to Shivi. What is the role of philanthropy in all of this? What's especially IKEA Foundation, you are supporting green solutions both in Africa and India. So can you share some highlights from that?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me here and to be a part of this wonderful panel. At the IKEA Foundation, we do recognize that two of the greatest challenges that the world faces today are climate and its poverty. And both of them have to be addressed together. It's not a choice either or. Both have to be solved together. So that's the point of view we have. And the way we work with that is it's a very important focus for us to work with green enterprises and to support them. Support them by helping develop climate smart solutions that are addressing everyday needs connected with the areas of waste. Venkat talked about that, about energy, and about sustainable food systems. And it's a privilege to be part of this group because India and Kenya are two of the most significant geographies that our work is concentrated. And I must say, the theme is scalability. So from a scalability perspective, in the work that we do with our partners, we have seen some trends emerge over the last few years which are very encouraging. I'll talk about a few of these. The first is the profile of entrepreneurs. If you look at a lot of these green enterprises, whether they are in India or in Kenya, most of them are being set up by young people, very tech savvy, educated, want to have a better life, not just for themselves, but for the communities that they are a part of, and very aware of the needs of our climate and to build a sustainable future. So when you look at that kind of a profile and you see this kind of a profile taking responsibility, taking a leadership role in terms of setting up these enterprises, that's a very, very strong start. And that's a very good foundation on which to build future success. So that's one. The second trend that we have seen is the emergence of business model that seem to work. They're commercially viable in very different scenarios. And when I say viable, they mean they're able to stand alone, operate independently, not dependent on subsidies or long-term support or grants for their survival. Yes, they need hand-holding and support in the initial stages. But long-term, these models have proven to be commercially viable. And when I say different scenarios, let me give a couple of examples. So we work with Boma in Kenya in a setting which is semi-arid, so more rural rather than urban. And there we are working with about 10,000 young people, making them more aware, conscious of their ecosystems. So they're working in protecting their ecosystems, their forest. And in the process, they're also creating livelihoods connected with those spaces. So aquaculture, bee harvesting, floriculture. So both are going hand in hand. They are protecting their ecosystems and in the process creating livelihoods for themselves, which are sustainable. So that's one kind of a setting. Another setting is the work that we do in India with a partner called TechnoServe. And they are again supporting a lot of green enterprises, mostly around waste management, mostly about transition to a circular economy. And that also works. These are models which are commercially viable. And like Venkat said, you have basically people who are waste pickers and then have migrated up the value chain and have now become full-fledged entrepreneurs, doing commercial contracts, doing negotiations, and creating employment for others. So everybody is moving up the value chain. So that's the second thing, which is very heartening to see that you find business models that are working, that are successful, and in different contexts, geographies, and scenarios. The third piece, which is also very, very satisfying to see, is this missing puzzle. So if you're talking about sustainability, what Venkat was also talking about, what is really missing? What we find is increasingly we are working with a lot of partners who are able to identify what the gaps are in the system, what the critical gaps are, and are able to come up with models and frameworks which can address those gaps. I mean, Venkat, you put it very nicely in terms of the supply and demand side being matched. If I go back a few years, you will find many partners working on the supply side. I'll create this community, I'll create this collaborative, I'll work in this village and cluster. Lot of effort around supply, but without really thinking through who's the buyer at the end of the day, who is taking up this product. So the demand side was not really focused on. So you had a lopsided balance. But today you see that we find partners who have recognized that these are the gaps. And it's not just the only one, there are others also. But demand is a key gap. So there are partners who have recognized that and who bring in that expertise. So CAF is another example. What Venkat was saying, close the loop. So that is another partnership which is helping do that. Address the demand side of things, and how do you really bring in these micro entrepreneurs and connect them into the normal business supply chain. So it's not sitting on the sidelines, and it's not just you focus only on supply and the demand is missed out. So these are some of the trends that we have seen, which gives us a lot of hope and a lot of energy that what we are doing works, what our partners are doing works, and it is sustainable and it is scalable.
Thank you. That's
If I can just add, interesting, because when we first started the conversation with IKEA Foundation back in early 2020, we dug through every piece of information from around the world. And the weakest evidence is that training and upskilling will actually translate to long-term sustained impact on livelihoods. It's actually a very weak evidence. Just training people, upskilling people will not automatically translate to better lives, right? And I think that was one of the first challenges that IKEA Foundation threw at us, saying, how is this going to model work? Because it's not just about training 10,000 people. They said, no. Our intent is we want to create jobs for 10,000 waste pickers in the circular economy and green economy space in the time span of 5 to 6 years, which means it had to start with designing for both supply and demand side.
That's really helpful. Please, Sam.
Yeah, very good insights from my two panelists. And I just wanted to add that indeed that revelation from IKEA Foundation is great. And as partners who are testing a green enterprise model, working with the IKEA Foundation to basically build the evidence of the efficacy of green enterprise approach in supporting both livelihoods and ecology, and filling the gap in evidence as far as rural livelihoods are concerned. One of the pieces that we've learned is the importance of identifying your constituency and categorizing them properly. And as he rightly puts it, as Venkat rightly puts it, just training and upskilling is not enough. And if we are looking at sufficiently pushing the youth generations to be the catalyst of change or the change agents, then we do need to take a blended approach that also supports access to capital, in particular, to start up and nurture those green enterprises. So it's about building the capacity around mindset and skills, and then supporting them with capital in order to relax the capital constraints, especially at the point where the youth are just about to enter the job market. And we realize that that then provides an entry point opportunity for the youth to adopt green enterprise or circular economy as a value system, rather than just one of the, the development speak and so on. So once they build it as a value system, then it becomes an integral part of them earning decent work or creating decent jobs for themselves. Number two is about understanding or growing the green enterprises that are already existing, supporting through technical assistance, giving business advisories, linkages to finance and capital for accelerated growth and expansion. That also creates a pull effect to provide opportunities for more youth to earn employment through these successful enterprises. And then lastly, supporting that by building a broad-based green ecosystem that outlines policies. Number one, having knowledge and generating research that supports identification of opportunities within that green value chain. And then number two, building collaboratives and alliances with government, with philanthropy partners, with technical institutions, and working collectively to push for adoption of green enterprises. And then lastly also, providing technical assistance to institutions. We've realized, like they say, and like we had in the morning, the mismatch between what the market demands and the skills that we are pushing and building among the youth. So bridging that gap would require building curriculum that reflect the needs for the industry, and the industry creating opportunities that meet the demands of the skills that we create in the institutions. So those are just important pieces that I wanted to highlight.
No, these are really insightful, and I think it gives the audience a lot of key things to keep in mind when we're talking about green entrepreneurship, the supply and demand, linking up the demand side for the jobs. Arpit, would you like to say any more about the public-private philanthropy kind of nexus and how?
Frankly, Anjumji, I would require the whole day actually to have a conversation on this particular subject. You know, I was talking about solar and green hydrogen and gigawatts and net zero, and I forgot to mention, my apologies, that we, as a sector skill council, which has been created by the Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship, we have a very unique structure. We have half on the governing council. We have half of the governing council is the industries, the private sector, and the half of the governing council is the ministries, whether it is the Ministry of Environment, Forest or Climate Change, or Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, or Ministry of Skill Development. So we have a very unique way of functioning, and waste management is one of the areas in which we have done an aggressive, massive work. Maybe, don't quote me, but maybe there's no other organization in the country or maybe in the world that has trained and certified more than 500,000 sanitation workers in 1 year. So, you know, when we talk about people of that community, definitely I would not counter anyone, but, you know, you require funds to at least recognize their skills and train them. I happened to get some grant from Ministry of Skill Development, and I remember that I went to one of the training programs in Gurgaon, and the sanitation workers weren't even aware how to actually use a personal protective equipment. वो उल्टा पहन रहे थे उसको. They never used it. So in that 5-day program, we actually, our subject matter experts, our industry partners, so there was a collaboration between the funds from the government, the industry partners who became the training leads, and we could actually teach them and train them on how to use a jetting machine, how to use a super sucker, how to use a suction machine for that matter, and leave everything apart. You know, at least a 5-day program gave them a government certificate. They were absolutely thrilled, and it was not only free lunches, but they went back and learned something. I would say out of 90,000 people that we trained in the country in that period, I would still say at least 10% of those sanitation workers, you know, went back with a learning. When I talk about such a partnership, we had a very unique partnership with Renew Power. You must have heard about the area which is the Run of Kutch in Gujarat. It's a very, very arid zone. And you can see there are a lot of women who are into salt extraction in that region, and they use water pumping systems to extract salt. So along with Renew Power, we designed a program for these women and their daughters, and we trained them on solar water pumping system. And they were given a complete 3.5 month rigorous training in a remote area near Pakistan. And to your surprise, I had personally taken around 20 industries, big industries, to visit that place, interact with these women, interact with their daughters, and UNEP was monitoring this entire training program, and to your surprise, that 80% of these women, they were offered jobs, on-the-spot jobs. So imagine, people from that, women from that community. So as you rightly mentioned, you require a private participation, you require the demand, you require the supply side also, but ultimately it has to be a collaborative effort. It cannot be the government alone, it cannot be the industry alone. I yet to see an industry which comes forward without a government push and says, I want to do this. I'm talking about India. Might be very few exceptions, would definitely be there. But ultimately, it all works hand in hand with the government policy. If the policy is in favor of the industry, then certainly the industry also comes forward, and that is the harsh reality. Similarly, State Bank of India, we took a CSR fund from SBI cards, and we identified one of the government hospitals in Delhi, and we installed a 1 megawatt power plant on their rooftop. And today, Madan Mohan Malviya Hospital is saving around 1 crore of electricity bill. The patients are happy, the people are happy, the doctors are happy, the administration is happy. So this is the kind of partnership that needs to be there. And recently we have tied hands with Jackson Group also, which is also on our governing council. And last thing that I would like to mention is, when we talk about entrepreneurship and the private sector and the government, so we have this recent scheme, which is the Pradhan Mantri Surya Ghar Yojana, which envisages to have around 1 crore households to be electrified in the next 2-3 years. And you require at least 1 lakh people, to electrify those households. So we have these private vendors who have been registered on the MNRE portal. You have the government support for the training. As I mentioned, now every government scheme has a skilling component, skilling, reskilling, upskilling component, especially in these areas of renewable energy and waste management. And you will soon see that even we have submitted a proposal of training around 20,000 solar technicians under the PM Surya Ghar Yojana. So you will see a lot of people who would be engaged as micro entrepreneurs, but then ultimately it is definitely the government which is kind of pumping some money, and there's industry which has a push-pull, and you have these people who do not have, I would say, I won't say deep pockets, who don't even have pockets to pay for the training program. So it's a collaborative effort. Thank you.
Absolutely, it's definitely, we can see kind of from all the examples that it's going to require everybody at the table for developing sustainable, scalable solutions.
Just one last word, else you would not be able to scale up.
Exactly.
Definitely, there is a challenge that when you scale up things, then definitely most of the times the quality is compromised.
Right.
Because the monitoring definitely becomes an issue. But if you are able to monitor the goals properly, if you're able to monitor all these programs properly, then without the support of the government, the scalability always becomes a challenge.
Absolutely, absolutely. I see that we're getting close to the time, and here's a code for folks who want to ask a question. So please log into mentee.com and enter this code. And of course, our esteemed panelists are with us throughout the conference, so if we're not able to get to your question, please feel free to follow up with them. Madam Lynett, I wanted to offer you a chance also to share any closing remarks as the questions come in.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that in Kenya, we have an innovative project that is going on currently, which is a 10-year project, which is known as the Financing Locally Led Climate Action. This is whereby the community are engaged in identifying the climate risks, and then they come up with the climate actions in relation to their community and the context of that specific community. So in terms of entrepreneurship, they've identified 5 climate actions, and one of them is on low carbon, where the youths are engaged in renewable energy. You know, youths are very energetic. So in terms of advocacy, in terms of distribution of the solar panels, they are engaged. And currently, the statistics say that we require about 30,000 technicians in the area of solar. So that is a job opportunity. In terms of the land use, we have issues on planting trees. And as a country, we have a drive for planting around 15,000 billion trees. And every individual is expected to plant about 30 trees per year. So that is a drive that is going on. We have the area of transportation. Our youths are engaged in transportation. We are talking about millions and millions of Kenyan youths engaged in the area of transportation. And then we also have issues of disaster risk management. The youths are using the digital platform to be able to train. There is mentorship, there is coaching on green economy, green entrepreneurship. And you cannot do this alone. You need the other partners. We have our development partners who are funding. So we are talking of green funding. We have our non-governmental organizations that are actively participating in terms of technical assistance, that's like Sam indicated. We have the youth groups, we have the civil society organizations. So what I'm trying to say that in terms of spurring a green economy, you cannot do it alone. Even as government, we still need the other stakeholders. And we are engaging the youth organizations, the civil society organizations. Thank you.
Thank you. So just before we switch gears to the Q&A, I wanted to kind of build on Madam Lynett's point and take you on a little kind of journey to see kind of where the arid context that Sam was talking about. So we have a short little video because as we always want to center our communities and the actual people that we are aiming to serve in our conversations, so we kind of are going to use technology to kind of go to the communities. And so I'd like to cue that video and also ask the organizers for the tablet for the Q&A as well, so I can read out those questions. I think we're missing the sound in the video. Is the sound not coming? Unfortunately, there was some really nice sounds in this video, but we'll just have to make do with the subtitles. Okay, so a lot of questions have come, and unfortunately the video, the audio, it didn't do justice, but we can share the link to the video later. But in the interest of time, we'll get into some questions, but I don't think we'll be able to cover them all. Here's one. and this is to anybody on the panel, what are the specific strategies put in place to ensure that green entrepreneurship models are inclusive with respect to marginalized genders and castes in India? How do we ensure that we're not further leaving out populations and not kind of creating more barriers for inclusion?
Well, I'll be very short and crisp so that so that my other panelists also have an opportunity to answer this question. In my opinion, I'll give you a small example. If you want to do, if the industry wants to set up a wind power plant in Odisha, there's no point because the wind potential is not there in Odisha. Not that because there is too much of wind, the wind turbines won't function. So what I want to say is that the industry has to be a very much part of that community where the development has to happen. Today we see a lot of people getting employment and we see a lot of entrepreneurship opportunities in places like Rajasthan or Gujarat because some gigawatt size power plants, solar power plants are coming there. So when the industry comes to a particular place, there always happens a local development. So industry plays a very, very important role in terms of creating entrepreneurs or giving jobs to individuals.
Can I add to that? Right. So there's one framework that has worked for us. We've also validated that with 56 other instances covering about 45 countries. It's called Place-Based Circular Economies. Closing the Loop program that I was referring to earlier is actually anchored around place-based circular economies. We actually have, based on the evidence over the last 3 years and from our own programs in India and Bangladesh, we actually have a very clear theory of change which says, how do we build thriving communities translating to climate resilient value chains? Which means, think of any value chain, any material or any resource value chain. Start with the community, what they are, how they are involved with those value chains, formally, informally, directly, indirectly. How do they contribute to the economy? How do they contribute to, in terms of the skills they bring in, even if it is not formal skills or higher order skills. And then design it in a way that translates to climate resilient value chains because that's the hook for the industry. The hook for the industry is not on saying, be part of the capacity building program, be part of creating better livelihoods for 1 million women or 1 million youth. The anchor for the industry is, on having climate resilient value chains, having value chains and supply chains that cannot be disrupted. They've just learned fresh from the COVID pandemic and how supply chains have been disrupted. They don't have a control on it. They're desperate for it. Carbon emissions footprint point of view, huge chunk of it is scope 3 emissions, which is upstream value chains and supply chains. Build it around it, and place-based circular economies is one way because it intentionally designs for women, youth, any cross-section of underserved and marginalized communities that we can possibly think of, from a broader women, from a gender narrative to this. I think the anchor for this and the biggest learning for us is from an inequity point of view, we always speak of how do we level the playing field. And I think the way the place-based circular economy, the theory of change that we've worked on is saying it's not just about leveling the playing field, but how do we raise the floor when it comes to addressing the inclusion aspect of it. I don't know if that addresses.
Absolutely. No,
Can
that's
I add
great.
to that?
Yes, please, Sam.
So again, different organizations work with these topics in their own ways. The way we try and address this is in a very simplistic way. We differentiate between the what and the how. When we say the what, we are really concerned about what themes and focus areas are we supporting together with our partners. And that will keep changing. Today we are working with this project, tomorrow it will be something else, depending upon what the strongest needs are. When it comes to the how, that is more fundamental. That is the guiding principles and values. So for us, principles like inclusion, equity, diversity, those are embedded into everything we do. Those are the non-negotiables. They will cut across the themes and the focus areas, and they are the ever-guiding things. So that is one way in which we make a differentiation, the what and the how. The how is the ever constant guiding force, and the what is situation specific, what the strongest need is at that point of time.
That's really helpful. Thank you.
Just emphasizing the criticality of embedding inclusivity as part of your value system. We believe in socio-economic and environmental inclusion. I call it SEE. And then that becomes the normal conversation within our organization, within our partners, and among our stakeholders. The number two is basically understanding your context, understanding what the local resources are, what are the local needs, and then focusing on building localized economies that look at economic prosperity and ecological sufficiency. And then finally is supporting acceleration. Many of these ideas, co-creating the ideas, particularly with the communities. I mean, time is gone where we come up with a solution and go and deliver it. We are now starting from the end, coming up and working, this is what we need to do. What are the indigenous knowledge? What can we harness from your community, and how do we use that to build a solution that works for you and support you to take it up to scale?
Please, Madam.
Yeah, just to add to what Sam is saying, we also have deliberate intentions, like we have the affirmative action that requires that at least 30% of the youth, women, and persons with disability are engaged. They have access to government procurement opportunities. Also in line with our Constitution of Kenya, we ensure that there is a representation of all categories, the vulnerable and the minority and the marginalized persons. And then we also engage them in public participation so that all the decisions that are made by the government, it must get the social license to operate from the community. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, I'm getting cues that we're out of time. Otherwise, I would have loved to keep the conversation going. I want to extend a warm thanks and gratitude to all of our panelists for taking the time, the journey, traveling to Delhi. Thank you to the audience for your time and attention. And please, feel free to reach out to get all of these questions answered. Thank you so much.
Kabla hii mradi kukuja, tulikuwa hakuna kenye tunajua, bali tu ni una kitu yoyote mpaka unakaa kungoja mzee mpaka apate kitu, unamuomba anakupatia. Lakini wakati mradi ilikuja, hatujahangaika, bali sisi tulipata haki yetu ambaye huwezi muomba mzee. Mtoto ukifukusiwa shule, mbeleni unafukusiwa, unakaa naye kutegemea baba yake mpaka wakati atapata pesa. Lakini kutoka tuletewe hii tunakuja, unaambia group, mimi nataka pesa fulani, mtoto wangu amefukuswa, unapata papo hapo, unapeleka mtoto wako shule. Na tena njaa, hatuwezi kulala na njaa.
They should come back here because the video is still playing. I'm waiting.
Tenetu nganayo indijele na joka gento nyokembo ngamu. Wale doyo na ibonga tata mekura bakitegemea lolo rayeni.
Wanawake wanaweza kufanya biashara bila kutegemea wazee. Swahili husema kutegemea cha mwenzio hufa maskini. Na ukipata kitu yako kibinafsi, ndio hata moyo wako yako itafanya. Mimi niko na furaha sana. Ndio umetusaidia sana.
Thank you, Sam. Madam Lynett. Arpit Sharma. Anjum, yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you all for being patient. We have a performance at the same venue starting at 6:30 this evening. Malini Avasthi, a Padma Shri awardee and well-known folk singer, will join us. We hope to see you here. Thank you.